Hey, what's up? It's Jake, and in this last section for Packer, we're going to be going over building a golden image pipeline with HCP Packer. It's going to be a little bit longer, but probably be a pretty good exercise that you don't see a lot of. So stay tuned here, and we'll go ahead and get started. So a golden image is a base image on top of which, any developer can build an app, letting you focus on the app instead of actual system dependencies and patches. Pretty standard, right? A typical golden image usually includes a system, logging, monitoring tools, recent security patches, dependencies, etc., etc. Traditionally, ops and security teams have to cross-reference some kind of spreadsheet or, you know, whatever to inform downstream developers and manually update build files when you release new base images. Um, I've had to work off these docs many times in the past, even from an infrastructure, not even developing, to figure out what's what does what, and just kind of have an idea of, or a Word doc or whatever of what you have to build, what the requirements are. So more sophisticated organizations automate this process by building and maintaining uh, CI pipelines. So HCP Packer registry kind of improves this process with tracking images metadata and storage location, providing correct image to developers automatically, and that's through Packer and Terraform integration. So as you can see here, when you do your Packer build and it gets boxed up into the Packer registry, that will go into your Terraform plan, which fetches the latest data from Packer registry and then just loops on this whole idea of continuous integration. In the case of Terraform plan, you can actually hook in continuous deployment. So that's what we're going to focus on. We're basically just going to define a golden image pipeline and build a base and app images, and then deploy them to AWS using Terraform. So the first thing we'll do is we'll make an EC2 instance, and we'll run Loki for log aggregation and Grafana for visualization. We'll take a golden image config that references Loki and Grafana details, and then build an app image for the golden one. And then the last part, we'll use Terraform to deploy an EC2 instance running that application image and view the logs in Grafana. So first thing you need to do, make sure you have an HCP account. You have an AWS account, cred set on your local environment, Packer installed locally, and Terraform installed locally. We're also going to need to enable HCP Packer registry, which I did in a previous video, but if you haven't done so already, go ahead and do that, and then in here you'll be able to see that, or just watch my previous video on was it Get Started with HCP Packer. So after you create the free registry under the services, then you should see something like this. The other thing you'll need to do is create a service principal, which again we did in the last video. So make sure you have that, and you got your creds, and then we'll have this service principal set with like this guy. In my case, the name is Packer, but we'll create a new one, and we'll just call it Learn HCP Packer. Maybe Learn HCP Packer. Make sure the role is contributor and hit save. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a principal key. Don't worry about how secret mine is because I'm going to delete this as soon as we're done. But do not share this with anyone. Copy those because you're not going to have access to them again. And then, yeah, so as long as you have it recorded, then you can go ahead and close that. And then I had previously run some things with my old client ID and secret. So we're going to reset this variable to the new values. just by exporting the client ID and then the client secret, like that. And now I have those environment variables set. And then we're going to clone this repository. So right now I have this get started in a Packer tutorial. So I'm going to get clone the HCP golden image repo from Hashicorp. And here it is. And then we're going to go to the learn golden image repo directory. And then we can go ahead and get started. So here's a look at the infrastructure and services we're going to deploy. Hashicorp's virtual machine, US West 2 and US East 2. We will have this Loki Grafana virtual machine running a Docker container on port 3000. The Loki port 3100 will be using Promtail to stream the logs over. And our Docker will have a Loki Docker plugin that's running on our Hashicorp's API and Hashicorp's DB, which will all be putting logs into Docker container logs, again, which Loki Docker plugin will pull out, stream it with Promtail, or really forward with Promtail, and then the Loki port on here will go through Grafana, and Grafana will be able to visualize that. So an example would be like, in this case, the Hashicorp thing. They're talking about like a coffee company. So you deploy these instances across 2 regions, and then these Hashicorp instances have the baseline tools like Docker and Promtail, and then the Hashicorp is basically an application consisting of an API and a database, like we were saying. The component run as separate Docker containers and are provisioned with Docker Compose, and Docker will store the logs generated by both the API and the database. Promtail, if you haven't used it, it's just an agent that sends logs from a local log store to an instance of Loki in this scenario. Promtail will forward the Hashicorp Docker logs to Loki using the Loki Docker plugin. And then Loki, if you've not used that, it's pretty cool actually, is a log aggregation tool, and it'll provide log data for querying and running on ports 3100. And Grafana is just a sweet visualization tool that will visualize the Loki logs and use its own web interface, which we'll get to on port 3000. So let's take a look at our directory structure. So we've got this learn Packer HCP golden image repo that we cloned, and there's a golden repo, Hashicorp, Loki, and Terraform. So in the Loki directory, let's see what we got. We've got a Packer template file. We've got a Loki config file here. Okay. We got some scripts. Loki setup shell script. It's got all the things. Starting Loki, and then there's a bootstrap markdown file. Looks like it just installs Docker, some dependencies, creates the local config from wget, and then, yeah, just sets the config file. Okay, not that bad. Our golden directory has a lot more stuff in it. It looks like it's got a Packer template file here. We've got Docker and Promtail, config files, scripts, configure enable Docker, and then Promtail. Okay, cool. This is actually a lot of work already done for us. And then we've got a Hashicorp directory. This is our actual coffee cup thing. It has a Packer template file, a Docker Compose file, and then some start scripts. Okay, that's pretty simple. This is all publicly accessible. So obviously, if you're doing this in production for your own environment, do not, don't do it like this. So here's a look at the Hashicorp explanation of this workflow. So we have an AMI repository over here and EC2 instances over here. So let's take a look starting from this side. So we have our golden Packer file, our Hashicorp's Packer file, and our Loki Packer file. Those all get published, or their metadata gets published to the HCP Packer registry, which also publishes the AMIs to AWS. Then we have the build iteration and the AMI reference from the Packer registry that go to our main.tf file, which then deploy our EC2 instances. So just an FYI, like in that scenario, the Loki instance simulates an existing implementation of Loki running on like your organization's network. In a production scenario, you'd use a DNS entry point to your production Loki instance. Okay, let's get started. So we're going to open start Loki Grafana shell script here. And note that both Loki and Grafana run on the same virtual machine. Loki as a system process and Grafana as a Docker container. Okay. Next, we're going to take a look at the Loki Packer file. Let me make this a little bigger. Okay, so Packer uses this file to build an AMI, runs Loki and Grafana. We're going to refer to this as the Loki image, even though it does have Loki and Grafana in it. Okay, so just so you know moving forward. And then the Amazon AMI Ubuntu Focal, this guy right here. This data block, as you see here, it's a data block, retrieves the Ubuntu 2004 image from US East 2 to use as a base. And then this Amazon EBS block source then references the ID, AMI name, source AMI, here it is, the ID of that image from Focal. Okay, makes sense, right? Then we have the build block, and the build block uses the base image from EBS, the Amazon-EBS base source block, and adds an SSH public key, the Loki config file, and the startup script to the image. Then Packer executes Loki setup.sh. Let's see if I can see that here. See here, execute shell script Loki setup sh to set up sudo, install dependencies, SSH key, Loki, etc. And then lastly, where is my build? HCP Packer registry. Here it is. The image sends metadata to HCP Packer registry so downstream Terraform deployments can use it. And we'll see that here. This image is for Loki built on top of Ubuntu 2004. Sweet. So the next, we're going to take a look at this golden. And the reason I'm going through this is just to make sure that we're going through all of the Hashicorp documentation to understand what's going on, and that once we start deploying things, you'll understand where it's coming from. So this golden base image includes baseline tools, service configuration. Let's open this up. The golden image contains Docker and Docker Compose for running applications, Promtail for log export, Grafana Loki Docker driver, latest for Docker logs. Where's that one at? Find latest. Not in here. It's probably just in my Docker Compose. I'll have to find it. Let's see, golden. Okay, so let's take a look at this from the top. We've got data, Amazon AMI. We have two Amazon EBS, AMI, EBS, AMI, EBS source blocks, which each have a reference to the corresponding AMI. One for each region, makes sense. Because the AMIs are region specific, so we have to build AMI in each region. The build block uses the base images, you can see here, and adds a SSH public key, the setup script, so obviously this does the installs dependencies, adds audit rules for Docker, Docker David config file, the Promtail config file, and the run Promtail shell script right here, which you can see here. All it does is goes to optional software promtail, no hup, run this on this config file. Okay, makes sense. And then that should be it for that. So I guess the last thing to do is to check our Hashicorps. Well, we might have to look at Terraform too, and check out our Packer file here. All right, so we've got a variable and then HCP Packer iteration named golden. All right, so here's our bucket, and then we have a channel. So it looks like we're gonna need that, but do I have that bucket? Maybe not. We have this data source to get our bucket name and iteration ID, cloud provider, region, and then we've got one for east, one for west. Yeah, makes sense. And then the source. Yep, everything's referential. And then let's go to our build block. So the build block uses the base images here and here and adds SSH key, Hashicorps config file, a Docker compose file, start scripts, and an inline shell command to copy the Hashicorp script to some kind of bootstrap script directory. And then the HCP Packer settings just point to our bucket with a description with a label. Okay, cool. All right, so the last folder is our Terraform folder. And if we look at our main, you can find out what's going on. All right, so HCP is our provider. Let's see, we got 2 EC2 instances. The Packer image. Here we go. Here's our bucket, iteration, cloud provider, region, and then the AWS provider and west. And here's our instance for both of those. And then associate public IP address, tag it with a name. Okay. All right, so next up, we're going to go ahead and, for the purpose of this exercise, create a local key. I don't know if I've ever done it with MingW64. I guess we'll see. Jake@gmail.com. Totally not my email address, by the way. /learn Packer. And I'm going to do empty key phrases. All right, learn Packer and learnpacker.pub. Cool. So now I've got some keys. So first we're going to use, let me actually really quick, is that, I'm just double checking here, my SSH setup. Yeah, so it's just going to grab my key from in here, and that's where it's going to live. Okay, cool. That's why I did it locally. I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? Highly don't recommend doing that in real life. Okay, so let's go to Loki. Let's get started. So I need to define an HCP Packer fingerprint. And if you don't know why, then watch my previous video and get started with HCP Packer. But in short, it uses a unique identifier for the build iteration. So this will default to the get head SHA. So we're going to override that with the fingerprint. And if the fingerprint matches the iteration marked complete, then Packer will exit without running the build. So let's go ahead and initialize this particular directory and then build out our image. See, if you're just copying and pasting like init build commands, it's a lot. You learn a lot less. All right, so let's see what happened. Loki HCR source code not available. bad source learn packer.pub. Create file learn packer.pub. It doesn't like where this lives. Is this supposed to be inside of my Loki directory? It says back. So go back a directory. Oh, it's supposed to be learn dash packer. All right, so let's rename this. Learn dash packer. Rename. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, so we're going to watch here for Packer to publish the build's metadata to HCP Packer registry when it gets to that final step. Building an instance might take a little bit, so as soon as this is done, what we're going to do is we're going to look for the Packer build on HCP. There, we can go, let me go from the beginning so you can see how I get there. So we'll go to Packer, right? And then we have our list of buckets at their latest associated iteration. So we're going to click on the Loki bucket, which will be Learn Packer HCP Loki image. Pretty cool, huh? And then here we can find information published to the registry from the Loki Packer build, including the description. Here, this is an image, and this is what we defined in our code, in our template. And the labels, Hashicorp Learn, Ubuntu, etc., which come from the HCP Packer registry block in our Packer file. So we take a look at Loki, Packer, HCP registry, and you'll see here's my description, and then here are my labels. Sweet. Let's see here. So now let's go take a look at our iterations. That's what we're working on right now. And you can see it's incomplete, but it is running. All right, it's complete. So now we can see our iteration here. We can click on this, and we can see our image ID, when it was created, all that stuff. We don't have any channels yet. And then let's see here. You're going to need to create a channel. So the registry channel enables us to reference a specific build iteration. It kind of reduces errors from manually updating config with image IDs and allows Packer and Terraform to automatically retrieve the most recent image. So we're going to open this sucker up. You can do it here, manage channels, or you can just come here and create a new channel. So we're going to make a new one named production, and we're going to choose our most recent iteration. And then that will add our image so we can create channel. And now we have a channel, and this channel allows us to work with Packer and Terraform. So now we can deploy the Loki instance, which will be kind of one of the fun parts. Do I have? No, I don't. Let's go to Terraform. So now, for reference, I am in this directory, and we are going to deploy this Terraform init. Get our providers and such, plugins, etc. Once this is done, we're just going to run a Terraform apply and check the execution plan. We should see an AWS instance .loki get created, and like a dozen other things. That's interesting. The init actually failed because it couldn't get this HCP version. TCP connects, a connection attempt failed because the connection party didn't properly respond. So I'll troubleshoot this and see what's going on. But this is why we go through the documentation. This is not on the doc. Yeah, must have been a weird network thing. I just ran it again and it was fine. There's a section in my Terraform guide, which I highly recommend you going through, where I talk about eventual consistency is consistent eventually. And sometimes you'll see exactly that. And if it's trying to grab something, even if I don't have any network problems right now, but at my house, but it's entirely possible that it just needed to run again. So usually the best step is just run Terraform in it again. Same thing can happen with Terraform applies or Terraform plans. All right, so now that that's been initialized, let's run and apply. All right, so what we're looking for here is once it builds the Loki instance, it should give us the Loki IP output, which will be the public IP address. And we'll use this IP in our base image to direct log forwarding to the Loki instance. All right, and there it is. We got our public IP. So now we got to run a couple commands to forward the Docker container logs that we're going to be running to the Loki instance. So we'll need to update 2 files with the Loki instance IP. So I'm on Windows, but if you look through the Hashicorp documentation, it does show you how to do this on Mac and Linux. But at least on Windows, we're going to go to Golden, and then we're going to go to our Promtail, and then the address here. We need this address. So I'm just going to copy this here. Bloop. Save. Just like that. And then we should have a Docker daemon JSON file that also needs our URL. There we go. And then we're going to go back to our Golden directory, and we're going to export our fingerprint and initialize Packer init right here. And then we're going to run the Packer build right here. And there we go. We don't have any auto files for environment variables, so it should just be running whatever is set in our Packer file, which is just the AMI prefix. Cool. And then we'll just wait for this to finish. All right, and we're done. So let's go ahead and create a channel for our golden image. All right, so we've got our golden base image here, and we've got an iteration. So let's make a channel, and you're never going to guess what we're going to name it. Production. Choose our latest iteration. Create channel. Cool. So since the golden image is already configured to send container logs to Loki, the Hashicorp image is built on top of the golden one. You don't need to modify the Hashicorp image configuration. Let's take a look at this here. All right, let's go to Hashicorps, export our Packer build fingerprint, and then let's initialize Packer, and then run Packer build, and we'll go ahead and wait for this to finish. All right, so we're just about done here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our overview and look at our buckets, and we need to create a channel for our Hashicorp image. So I'm going to come here, go to channels, create a new channel, production, choose an iteration, and you have to wait for this to finish. And now it's there. Let's go ahead and create this channel, and now we can deploy our Hashicorp instance. So let me go back to Terraform, and we're going to look at Terraform main here. Oops, scroll down. There we go. All right, and the following configuration we want to change a little bit. This defines the EC2 instances in the east and west regions. So we need to add let's see, data, HCP Packer iteration, image, west image Loki. Interesting. So I need a Packer image for Loki. So we're gonna just take this. I guess we can just add it, huh? Not my preferred way of doing things, but let's just save that. And then the AMI value reference to, let's see, where am I at? AMI value reference to HCP Packer data instead of literal AMI IDs. So in the outputs file, we need to add these two values to get our public IP addresses. Then we can save this and run a Terraform apply. Terraform apply. Now I just added it to the end, and since the other infrastructure already exists, it should just recognize that the state is there are no changes to be made, and then only add the Hashicorps that I'm looking to add. All right, we're done, and now I have a Hashicorp East IP and a West IP and my Loki IP. So we can do a little test. It may take a couple minutes for this to come up, but we can curl using the Terraform output the raw IP, the raw data really of Hashicorp East on port 19090/coffees. And if you don't get a response, just wait like a minute or two. So I'm still getting a connection error. I don't know what they did in their build, but I did check the security groups, and there is a security group attached to this instance, which I will verify is the 3.15 address that we're using here. And there's a security group to allow all traffic, source all traffic on port 19090. So I'm hoping this isn't a problem in the actual container, but I'm gonna go check it out. Well, unfortunately, this tutorial is pretty broken. So I logged into this instance and I went through and I read the logs, and there's a couple errors, but the main problem is it isn't transferring files and there's no Docker images running. So the reason the connection is refused is because we have this service API that's running on port 1909 on the front, forwarding to 9090, but that actually never happens. So everything that's supposed to be built with Docker Compose is just not getting built. So the front end part that would be the cool flashy part that we can look at is not working. So what does that mean? It means that you can't see your Docker logs in Grafana. However, that's not really the point of this tutorial. So although extremely disappointing, and I'm going to leave feedback on this one, I don't have the patience to go in and troubleshoot and rebuild this entire thing. It's really not worth it, because the point is to learn how not to browse logs, but to set up your Packer and HCP Packer registry to create golden image pipeline, allowing you to create reusable base images, on top of which you can build other images. So this really isn't that different than the get started with Packer thing that I had originally created. Really what you're looking at is we have an instance. It was created with an AMI. That AMI is managed with this channel having set to an active iteration, and all the other active iterations that we have for the various channels in the various buckets are dependent downstream and upstream both. So the get started tutorial that I created is actually probably an easier explanation of this, but I did try to go through their golden image with HCP Packer tutorial. But yeah, alas, it was somewhat disappointing. So I'm gonna get a hold of Hashicorp and let them know, and then we'll take it from there. So this is going to conclude the Packer section. Kind of leaves it on a meh note, which sucks. But hey, that's not my fault. Sometimes the docs are good, and sometimes they're not. Everything up to this point has been great. Everything that we've done has worked really well and been a good learning experience. So if I go to look at our tutorials here, we went through AWS. I did Docker in a single video really fast, and then HCP Packer, we did that one. That one was really good. And then we did the production, the build a golden image. We went through all of these for the get started. We didn't go over configuration language, so I might do that one last actually. I'll go ahead and do this really quick, and we'll go ahead and wrap it up with that.